In three, two, one. Listeners, welcome to the show, or welcome back to the show. I'm excited to welcome back Dr. Demartini on the podcast. He was on our show about 2 years ago. And one of the things that I've always noticed, either listening to Dr. Demartini's presentations or videos, or even when we had him on the podcast last time, I left the interview buzzing and just thoroughly excited about the things that he talked about. And so it's been a couple years and we have got him back on the show. We're very privileged. And I just want to say, Dr. Demartini, welcome to the show. And how are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you again for having me. I was looking forward to this.
Absolutely. And before we get started, I have to ask if you mind sharing where you're at, because we've never done a podcast with somebody that is where you're at, and and I think it's really exciting.
I am on the Amalfi Coast. Um, Out the window is Sorrento, just about 100 yards from here. I'm anchored right offshore from that. And if you look over on the other side of the rooms here, you'll see um, Vesuvius, Pompeii, and Naples. And behind Sorrento, you got Positrano, and Capri's off to the left. So I'm in a lovely location in Italy in the Mediterranean.
That sounds like absolute heaven to me. So we've never done a podcast with somebody calling in from their boat, and especially in the Mediterranean. But are you on the boat a significant amount of the year? Is this kind of where you like to live and stay?
Well, most of the time I was traveling prior to COVID, but now I'm on here right now. I don't know how long I'll be on. I've been living on here for 20 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've been off and on traveling by plane or by jet, or I'm sailing. So
Ah,
I'm this has been my home since 2001, actually 9/11. I bought it
wow.
for as an anniversary present for my wife because at the time we were living in Trump Tower and she didn't want to be there after 9/11. So we had some other homes in Australia. So we went over to Australia and I told her, I said, I don't have any scheduled programs in Australia, but 4 times a year, I'm not going to see you that often unless we've come up with plan B.
Yeah.
So this was plan B. That way we could rendezvous easier around the world.
The boat life sounds like a good life. We're doing a trip down to Mexico, and I recently booked a yacht, a 60-foot yacht for our trip. And it's my first yacht I've ever reserved, and I'm just thoroughly excited about getting to go down there and doing a trip down there. So I'm a new passionate person about the water boat life, because it's really cool how amazing they make
Well,
these
I think
boats.
from what you said right before we came on, that Italy has a little bit of a heart for you.
Yeah.
So I guess the Mediterranean or Tuscany or whatever will be a good place to visit and
Yes.
maybe sail and all visit. So
Yeah.
I think most females that I know, when they think of Tuscany and Florence, particularly Tuscany, they kind of perk up a bit.
I,
So I
I,
think that's a romantic location.
well, I'm single
Great
right
art
now,
there.
so that's perfect, right? Get a boat and head to Tuscany, head to the Med. All right, Dr. DeMartini, I'm so glad to have you on the show today. As you know, this is the Business Method podcast, and we talk a lot about high performance and entrepreneurship. We have a lot of listeners that are current entrepreneurs in the hustle, scaling their businesses, or are aspiring entrepreneurs. And we dive a lot into, as you know, mindset, how incredibly important mindset is as an entrepreneur, as anybody that wants to create significant change in their life. And I was reading through your blog this morning, and there's a few articles that you wrote that really, really stood out for me that I thought would apply to our listeners very well. And the first one is how to unlock the full potential of your mind. And, you see stuff like this on the internet all the time, YouTube channels, Instagram clips, TikTok videos about how to unlock your full potential. But I know thoroughly, because I've followed you for, I don't know, 15 years plus now, that you're an expert on this and you've been doing it, and you're living on a boat in the Mediterranean by Italy. So you know how to unlock full potential if you can do that. But could we dive more into that article about the points that you made throughout that writing and how we can apply this to our lives?
Okay, I write so many articles, I'm not sure which one it is.
Uh-huh.
Um, but
Well,
I could
I'll
do
go
one
through.
today. Something.
I can go through the some of the points here. So we have the stimulus, response, reflex, and reflex and reflect, reflective
Yeah, I think I get it
awareness.
now.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
I got it. Right. So uh, every human being, regardless of gender or spectrum of gender, culture or age, lives moment by moment by a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most to least important in their life. Whatever is highest on that list, what their life truly demonstrates they're committed to, not the fantasies that they inject into their lives by the comparison of other people, not the fantasies that they impulsively, but what their life shows and demonstrates is truly important to them. This highest value, they spontaneously are inspired from within to fulfill and act upon. There's a thing called reaction and a thing called action. And reaction is externally stimulated, and action is intrinsically driven. And individuals who live by the very highest value, the highest priority, or as Gary Keller says, the one thing that most inspires them, they're the ones that build momentum and are literally the people that do incremental momentum building actions that achieve the greatest outcome. They're the ones that have a tendency to want to pursue and tackle challenges that make a contribution humanitarianly to the world and solve problems. They're not shrinking from problems. They're searching for problems and challenges they'd be inspired to solve. And so filling your day with the highest priority actions, the number one thing, the 20% of the 20% of the 20% of the 20% of what you absolutely love doing, it gives you the competitive advantage because you don't have the friction and resistance of the personas and masks and facades that you put on because of the comparison of other people. You're intrinsically called from within to act. Mine is teaching. I do it every day for 49 years now. I love doing that. If you can focus on what it is that you're absolutely inspired, that's where you're most objective. That's where you're most reflective. That's where you have the most momentum. That's where your executive center calms down with glutamate and GABA, calms down the impulses and instincts that distract you from being present. That's when you're most inspired. You feel that your mission is being accomplished. That's when you're most equitable with other people and have the most equanimity within yourself and authenticity. And I believe that every symptom in the world, in your life, in every area of your life, is a feedback mechanism to guide you back to that authentic, integral self that inspires you. So that is the key to building momentum, transcending obstacles. Limited beliefs that they've talked about are nothing more than injected values of people that you didn't select and didn't mentor under, that have infiltrated your consciousness, that you're trying to scatter yourself being instead of being authentic to yourself. Being first at being you is greater than being second at anyone. And this is the key in being clear of what that is. On my website, I have a value determination process to assist people in clarifying that. But if an individual will stick to the highest priority things, if they fill their day with the highest priority actions that inspire them, their day won't fill up with low priority distractions that don't. And then they become unstoppable.
I love that. A couple questions. One, if somebody doesn't know what that is for themselves, how can they find that? And two, can that change with over time, like different chapters, different periods of their lives, like pre children, post children, sort of thing?
Yes. Again, on my website, drdemartini.com, there's a complimentary private 30-minute questionnaire to help you narrow it down. I've been studying human values for over 43 years and lecturing about it. And I developed a more objective way of defining what they are. Because many times people are, if you ask them what they value, they'll tell you all kind of cliches and idealisms and social idealisms from mothers, fathers, preachers, teachers, conventions, traditions, mores.
Right.
You know, if you ask somebody, if you ask 1,000 people or 10,000 or 100,000 people at a conference, how many want to be financially independent? Everybody puts their hands and legs up in the air. And yet what their life demonstrates is not that.
Right.
Their life demonstrates they want to buy consumables that depreciate in value, and they get, more month at the end of their money than money at the end of the month, because what they fantasize and what they're actually living are different. I want to know what they're actually living, what their life demonstrates, not their words, but their actions, to build a foundation, to build momentum around. So that's what on the website people can do. It's a simple 13 questionnaire that is really powerful, that helps people narrow that down. And do they change? Yes. Most people start injecting the values of mothers around age 1, fathers around age 3, starting to get preachers and teachers around age 4. And then in elementary school, you start getting your social network starting to infiltrate, and teachers start to get in. And as you go through life, you just keep getting layered upon layered into social indoctrination and the herd mentality. And the real you is somehow gets squashed in there. And then eventually in your 40s or so, you try to get to that authentic you to come out. And so it gets suppressed, and it can change and be influenced by the external world until you're strong enough, as Emerson said in his essays on circles, to bust past those constraints of what people expect of you and give yourself permission to shine from within, and let the voice and the vision on the inside become louder than all opinions on the outside. When you do that, it's there. And yes, it can change. And usually decade by decade, you can see refinements. The more authentic you are, the more incremental it changes. The more inauthentic it is, the more cataclysmic changes occur to get you back on track. So the universe around you and your physiology within you, I would say that if you listen to your physiology and psychology, you'll do incremental change and keep it refined. If you don't, you're going to listen to sociology and theology and the rules around you to dictate that. And it's wiser to be governed from within than having to be governed from without, if you want to master your life and not be a victim of history.
Something that I've seen other people experience, and myself included throughout my life, is that how does one trying to or having struggles tapping into that inner authentic self, while at the same time still holding on to maybe past cultural values. So a quick example, I'm in Austin, Texas, right? A lot of Texans, people here are very proud about Texas. And say somebody goes off on their life, and they just carry this thought process with them. I'm a Texan. This is how Texans live. This is how we do it in Texas. So, but there's this inner voice saying, there's also another voice saying, but what we really want you to do, or your life purpose, is to travel the world and, maybe start a business and feed hungry children or whatever it may be. And they're torn between that connection of their past and what this other voice is saying inside of them.
That's a great point. The Roman poet and politician Seneca said that you measure an individual by their most distant ends. Okay. And the magnitude of space and time within the innermost dominant thought determine the level of conscious evolution they've obtained. When I studied Socrates and Epictetus and even Einstein and many others, I found out that they had a mindset that I'm not a man of my own locality. I'm not a man of my family, my community, my city, my state, my nation. I'm a citizen of the world, or a citizen of the universe.
Right.
And I've taken that. I've got an internal dialogue that the universe is my playground. The world is my home. I live on a ship called the world. Every country is a room in the house. Every city is a platform to share my heart and soul. So I've always imagined myself outside, because the broader the perspective, the more objective and broader the perspective, almost a celestial view, the more you see neither good nor evil in the game. And right. The more you transcend the moral hypocrisies that trap people in the box, and the idea of a locality of their, you might say, their mortality. So I'm a firm believer in giving yourself permission to shine, not shrink, and to think of yourself as a celestial being having a terrestrial experience instead of a terrestrial being having a celestial experience. I was having dinner with Rupert Murdoch in New York with his daughter and her husband and my wife many years ago. And I asked him how he, globalized his influence. And he said something very important, which I was already doing, but I emphasized it more. He takes a globe. He has a big globe in his office sitting on his desk. And he takes the globe and he holds it in his hand and he spins it. And he looks out from outside the globe looking down, and he asks himself, what message do I want to bring to what part of the world? The world is mine to play and to
Mm,
create what I want in. And he sees it from out here, a bigger perspective. We at one time, the theologies of the major religions of the world, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, or whatever, were highly influenced by the third century and fourth centuries, Neoplatonic philosophies, by Aristotle and Plato. But at the time, they believed in a geocentric model. And this is a Ptolemaic model, not a Copernican revolutionary model. And they had this idea that you had fixed stars and you had the celestial world and you had the terrestrial world. The world of trial was the terrestrial world, and the celestial world was the more heavenly. And they had that idea. And so they had a fixed boundary that they thought. And then when Thomas Wright and Galileo came along and had a telescope and looked out and saw, oh my God, that Milky Way that Pythagoras understood is there's now millions of those Milky Ways out there. And they
mm,
saw that these stars were galaxies. And we now look and see this vast web, and we realize that we're part of a vast system and that we have an influence. As Arthur Eddington said, when the electron vibrates, the whole universe shakes. And we don't give ourselves permission to think outside the box. I think the people like, Elon Musk and Richard Branson and Bezos are starting to think outside and think, what are we going to do on this in this universe now? I think they're leaders because they have an astronomical vision. If unless you have an astronomical vision, don't expect to do a global influence. Unless
mm.
you have a global vision, don't expect to have a national influence. You always want a vision bigger than the obstacles, so you can transcend them and see them on the way, not in the way. Otherwise, you'll play small. I learned from Ed Tellison, never live where you can't see the farthest horizons. All my homes were on the 62nd, 63rd floor, top of a mountain, or out at sea, where nothing blocked my vision and horizons. And I'm a firm believer that if you give yourself permission to live authentically, the space and time horizons keep expanding, just like the telomeres on your genes keep expanding every time you're doing something you're inspired by.
I love that idea that you live only in places where you can see the horizons. Because I mean, everybody knows when you go to the top of a mountain and you see this beautiful view, or the Grand Canyon, or whatever, or the ocean, that the psyche kind of changes, right? Your whole body, and it feels different. And if we're looking at that on a regular basis, I could imagine how the human psyche and the brain and the body would perform, and in what we would think about, as opposed to looking at a busy highway out of your window, or even just, a tree right in front of your face. And so so maybe we can talk more on that. What do you think is happening to the brain, to your conscious, subconscious, when you're in that environment, looking at the horizons on a regular basis?
Well, there is a thing that astronauts, Edgar Mitchell, really initiated called the overview effect. And the farther you go out away from the Earth and look down upon the Earth from the moon, for instance, or maybe the space station, the more difficult it is to judge.
Mm,
And you see the things neither good nor evil.
mm,
You're able to see both sides of things objectively, and you're more likely to love and appreciate this magnificence and this awe-inspiring planet. So, yeah, I think the broader the space and time horizons, the more grateful we are. I think that's why they had in the theology that as you go out into the celestial space, you have harmony, and you go down to the terrestrial space, the word terrestrial ends in trial, judgment. So we tend to be narrow-minded when we go down gravitationally down to the earth, and we tend to be more radiationally radiate, enlightened ourselves as we go out into a bigger view. And so this overview effect is real, and there's no doubt that it has an impact. The Nobel Prize winners, the 2016 Nobel Prize winners, and um, when they did things on place cells and grid cells, they found out that there is a social hierarchy, and the social hierarchy has an altitudinal component. And typically you'll see the socioeconomics rising up and living on top of the mountains, or flying more, or being out at sea. You see that. And so that it is an impact. And as I said, you want to make sure that you don't have anything blocking your view,
mm-hmm.
because I was in New York many years ago consulting for a doctor, and it was in a building that was in kind of a cramped area of the town. And it was on the lower floor. And the only window he had in the office, this doctor's office, was out his window. And from his desk, it had this tiny window over on the left side. And because I understood this principle, I asked his assistant to go to look at the area codes where his patients were coming from. And just intuitively, from my observation, what you see in your mind's eye is what you get. Mm-hmm. And we really showed him that the area codes were predominantly what he was seeing out that window. He had a yearning to want to look out and get connected out from that window. And he had a body of patients coming predominantly from what he saw out a window.
Wow.
So if we have a very cramped in view, we get a cramped in life. So I'm a firm believer that every time you live by your highest values, you give yourself permission to expand.
Yeah.
And you don't end up at the shrink's office, you end up at the stretcher. I'm not a shrink, I'm a stretcher. I help people expand their view. And the highest priority actions are literally higher priority, higher levels. As Emerson says in his circles, the soul constantly calls us to ever greater concentric spheres, and it doesn't put a boundary on it, but our mind tends to limit ourselves by new paradigms that we've injected from outer authorities. But if we subordinate to outer authority, we'll get caught in the past. That's why in business and in education, if you're doing nothing but citing old authorities instead of being innovative and create a new authority, you're going to hold yourself back. I love the beautiful mind with Russell Crowe when he's out there looking with the pigeons and looking for algorithms. And all these guys are talking about, they're sitting on the bench laughing at him because he hadn't written anything. And he says, yeah, but you're citing people of the past. I'm creating original ideas. But he's the one that got the Nobel Prize for equilibrium model, the Nash equilibrium. And he's the one that impacted economics and social dynamics and left his mark because he was an original thinker. And that came from stepping out of the box and not subordinating to the world around you and original ideas. Originality, genius, creativity, innovation. I spoke at the United Nations recently about that, and I found that occurs to the degree that we are spontaneously inspired to act on fulfilling something that's deeply meaningful. That will automatically originate new ideas. And that's why, and as you know from Bezos, when he went and talked to and looked at that video on Sony, they were not talking about becoming number one in Sony. They wanted to do something for Japan. They had a bigger vision. That's what made them their company so significant. So give yourself permission to do something extraordinary, a vision that's beyond your own mortality, legacy-oriented things, and watch what happens. It does have an impact. It has an impact on your financial destiny. It has an impact on your social impact. It has an impact on your vitality and energy, because the greater the cause, the greater the outcome in life.
Yeah. This is exactly why, for the listeners, it's so important to get out of the house and get into nature and get out of the office and go hike and go, see these beautiful views on a regular basis. And even more important now, we know that it is to have a view for wherever you live. One of your articles, you wrote kind of more in depth about neuroplasticity and epigenetics. And this is a hot topic these days. We talk about neuroscience a lot on the podcast. We've had a lot of neuroscientists on the podcast, flow state experts. I'm wondering if we could dive more into that, even more curious about when you're in that state, when you're seeing these beautiful views, when you're in nature, to get in that mindset to be more creative. Do you know exactly what's happening with the brain and the body, and can you define that a little bit more for us?
Well, individually, that's based on the content, because the different areas of the brain will light up based on the content of what inspires them.
True.
But unquestionably, when you're living in alignment and congruent with what you value most, the blood glucose and oxygen is given to the forebrain and the telencephalon, the prosencephalon embryologically. This forebrain is where the executive center is, the medial prefrontal cortex, and that has oligodendrocytes, which are specialized glial cells that actually myelinate the nerves and increase the speed of conduction and increase the functions of the greatest number of associations and creativity you can do. It also links into V5, V6 area of the cortex of the occipital region for vision, and allows you to have the greatest amount of visual information. And the old saying that those with a vision flourish, those without a vision perish.
Mm-hmm.
It also helps you strategically plan because you have the most visual content and you have the most information. It also calms down the amygdala and neutralizes the impulses and instincts. And it also activates the associative motor cortex for spontaneous action. So when we live by our priority, we're literally myelinating that area of the brain, and that's neuroplastic. And if we are living by lower priority things, the blood glucose goes down into the amygdala and into the hindbrain spinal reflexes for survival, not thrival. And now we demyelinate the forebrain and myelinate this area. And now we go into impulse and instinct and become more addictive in behavior. I always say that compulsive, impulsive, immediate gratifying addictive behaviors is compensation for not filling our day with high priority actions.
Mm-hmm.
When we're really inspired by something, engage on it, we don't want to go and take breaks, and we don't want to go and drink and party and do that. We were interested in absolutely doing something that's deeply inspiring and meaningful.
Right.
So yeah, we're neuroplastically remodeling the brain moment by moment, and the dendrites and the little spines on the dendrites can be changed in micromilliseconds. It's changing. The proteins are vibrating at femtometer frequencies. And this is a constant remodeling brain. And that's why you want to prioritize what you're thinking, prioritize who you're hanging out with, prioritize the actions you do, prioritize what you're eating. If you're not filling your day with the absolute highest priority things, don't expect the most amazing results. Neuroplasticity is real.
You mentioned prioritize eating, and just curious off the top of my while we're here, what type of diet do you keep? And maybe sleep schedules?
Well, my diet is, I'll just share what I've had today. This morning I had fresh yogurt, plain yogurt. I have some berries and some mango, and I had some beautiful multigrain bread, a little toasted, slightly toasted. Mm-hmm. And then that's for that. And for lunch, it varies. Sometimes I'll just have some sea bass or some fish or whatever, some carrots, some broccoli, and usually some multigrain bread. At dinner, I sometimes have brown rice and vegetables in it. They make it specially for me with sesame seeds and some nuts on it. And then I have 2 grapes for dessert. I don't eat sweets. I just eat grapes. And so I'm a very simple eater. I'm more about eating the things that allow me to perform than I don't go for impulse eating. I don't, eat sweets and junk food. None of that's my life, because that's not priority to me. So that's my typical diet. That's what I eat every day. I drink water, and I have usually vegetable juice, and I have carrot and celery and cucumber and sometimes other greens in there. And I have at least 1 glass of that a day. And and I drink water. I haven't had coffee. I've had 3 cups of coffee my entire life. I've had very little tea, no caffeine tea. It's usually herbal teas, ginger tea or some sort of tea like that, raspberry tea, if I have any tea, and no alcohol, 1 glass of wine in all these years. So I've been pretty consistent on that for almost 50 years, and I'm 67 in 2 months.
Oh, wow. Happy early birthday. Sleep schedule, sleep times?
That varies. I'm about to do a presentation from midnight till 2 p.m. for the next 2 days, starting tomorrow, and have a conference before that at 10 p.m. So I'll do something from 10 to 11:30, then I'll start another one at midnight. I vary that because of the global scale. And so I don't have an absolute rhythm primarily because of that. So my circadian rhythms are very unique in that respect. But as I traveled around the world, I didn't get jet lag. I think if you're really, 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 really inspired by what you do, you don't notice that as much. And but I have very interesting hours that varies because I'm in different time zones. I'll be in Japan, or I'll be in India, or I'll be in Africa, or Australia, or whatever it may be, from where I am. And those are all different time zones doing programs. And I love it. My love for what I do tends to be a higher priority than an absolute rhythm on that. And with the way I travel, that's the way it's been. So I seem to be performing pretty well on that. I do my exercise, and I do get sleep. I just don't get them at the exact same time every day. And that has its downsides according to physiologists. But when I monitor it, it doesn't seem to have had a major aging process so far me yet. I still have more energy than most people, and I still can knock out 18 hours a day.
That's absolutely incredible. Okay, so let's hop back into neuroplasticity. So we know like the brain is plastic, right? And that it can regenerate itself. And there's things you can do to help regenerate itself and help not regenerate itself. And so when we're following our passion, living by our priority and purpose, I'm assuming our brains are automatically working in a way where they're regenerating themselves and functioning on a level that we can learn faster and we're creating new neural pathways. Does that sound correct?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be pedantic about it here. If you go into the etymology of the word passion, you will find out it means to suffer. It comes
Okay.
from pati and pasi, which means to suffer. So I don't have passion. I don't focus on passion. Passion is and compassion means to suffer or suffer with somebody. I have very little interest in that. A man on a mission, I would call myself more than a passionate individual. Passion usually means ungoverned, uncontrolled impulses and instincts from the amygdala.
Okay.
But the man on a mission is what I would call myself. An inspired mission, which is highest in value, which is the telos, as Aristotle described, without a doubt causes neurogenesis. The oligodendrocytes are involved in neurogenesis in various regions of the brain, depending on what and how you're using your brain. To say it's neuroplastic is we want to be clear that it's not like it's just changing everywhere. It's very specific to the absolute priorities that we have in life. And when we are requiring it, and when we are doing something and tying our values, the pulvinar nuclei in our thalamus filters out our sensory reality and allows us to extract the most important information out of all the infinity information that's coming at us. So we select the information. That information goes into the brain. It goes into the conscious level. It integrates conscious and unconscious most effectively. We're more aware, and we end up having the most neuroplastic regenesis of the brain. They didn't believe that was occurring in the 70s. Around the 80s and 90s, it started coming in. Now we know it's true,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in certain regions. But without a doubt, I don't want to make it like it's just you do something and you do it, because sometimes we're just myelinating nerves and decreasing the degeneration of nerves by using them. But the neurogenesis is more specific on something that we feel engaged by and more inspired by. And that's why I tell people, if you want to maximize your learning process, ask whatever you're about to learn, how specifically is it helping you fulfill what you value most? How
Mm-hmm.
is it helping you fulfill what's deeply meaningful? And make as many links in your brain and answer that question as many times as possible. And you'll have the greatest neurogenesis and the greatest, uh, neuroplasticity and myelinization of the brain. The oligodendrocytes respond to intentions and attentions that are meaningful.
Um, that's mind blowing. I love this stuff. I want to shift a little bit and talk to a mindset or talk to a little bit more about the mindset for creating results for entrepreneurs. And of course, it's in alignment, I would imagine, for most people, actually, it is to follow that inner core, authentic thing that lights you up. But you talk about how to make money using the law of fair exchange. And I think like as an entrepreneur, we have a community of entrepreneurs. We have a lot of listeners, and people want to dive into either the new way to make money online. Let's just say Amazon, or whatever's hot at the moment, and they want to hustle really, really hard for X amount of time until they get to a point where they have X amount of money, and then they can do whatever they want to do afterwards, right? And I think this is very much ingrained in society, maybe even primal mindset for a lot of people to work hard for X amount of years, and then you'll get the freedom that you want, or the life that you want. So, can we dive more into understanding how to make money using the law of fair exchange, and then maybe how, like, in many ways, that those hustle years of work, can be more of a curse than a blessing?
Well, many people have Monday morning blues, Wednesday hump days. Thank God it's Fridays and week friggin' ends. And
Uh-huh.
they have a
Yeah.
schizophrenic life doing something to earn money so they can escape it with a break, a vacation, or retirement, and doing something that then they think as an escape, their dopamine drives them to do, which they think is going to be meaningful, but eventually it's just spending the money and then having to go back to work.
Right.
I think that's a little bit insane myself. And I think that that's not the way to live your life, because making money without meaning leads to debauchery, but making money with meaning leads to philanthropy.
I like that.
To me, your vacation and vocation can be the same. I've spent my 49 years of my focus on how to do that. I've helped thousands of people do that. There's no doubt in my mind you can do something that's deeply meaningful that you love doing, that you can't wait to get up in the morning and do, and get handsomely paid to do that, and go do something extraordinary. And then you don't have to escape it. You're
Yeah.
doing it because you love doing it. You know, I had lunch yesterday with a very wealthy billionaire. It's here on the ship with me. And, he is a very driven individual. He loves what he does. He's incredibly creative. He's an amazing genius, one of the brightest men on the planet. And he doesn't, we were flying together from Singapore into Hong Kong on the same plane. And everybody was crashing out, going to sleep. We were the only two people who had our computers up and were working away, because we are not trying to escape our life. We're engaged in it. Mm-hmm. So there's a step-by-step process I'd like to share that I extracted and summarized from a book called The Time Trap by Albert McKinsey. You know, if you make a list of every single thing that you do in a day, everything, and I don't mean broad, vague generalities, marketing, sales, or whatever. I mean, down to the very nitpicky action steps you do moment by moment, and make a list of every action step you do. And then on a column next to that, after you made this exhaustive list, it's both personal and professional, then ask how much does it produce per hour? Because the productivity per hour means that you're serving somebody. Mm-hmm. It's making a difference and somebody's willing to pay for it. And you make, what is it producing per hour? And if you do, you will find out that you're majoring in minors and minoring in majors, and many times, and you're not really taking command of your priorities. And then next to that, and once you get it all summarized and what it produces per hour by extrapolation, then summarize that by prioritizing it. What is the producing the most down to least? And that gives you some priority. Then next to that, put a column in on a 1 to 10 scale. How much meaning does each of these actions have? A 10 being extremely meaningful, that you can't wait and you're inspired to do it. You love to do it. Nobody has to motivate you extrinsically to do it. And a 1 is something you have to be pushed and motivated to do. See, I'm not a motivational speaker. Motivation is a symptom, never a solution for human beings. Mm-hmm. It's a sign of unengagement and not prioritization. If you have to have external motivation to get you to do something, you're living by duty and extrinsic push, and you're having to push people uphill. And that's not the way to have people working for you, and not the way to work. And that's the people that want to escape and want the breaks and want the vacation. I'll come back to a story from the Wall Street Journal an article I put in there. And then the third one is, how much does it produce to delegate that to a high quality person that can do a greater job than you at the highest standard? And what's the cost? And then what's the spread between that, what it produces per hour versus what you actually pay per hour? And then prioritize that. And the next column next to that, write down how much time do you actually spend on it per day. Mm-hmm. And on the final column, prioritize that entire list according to spread, priority of what it produces, plus meaning. And I guarantee you, if you'll do that exercise and summarize that exercise, and then layer out and delegate all the lower priority things that are less meaningful, less productive, and allow you to maximize your spread, you increase engagement in yourself, you increase job opportunities, you help the economy, you increase the literally factorial relationships economically with people, you give job opportunities, you're free to do highest priority things, you absolutely are inspired to go to work, and you're giving other people the opportunity to do the same if you hire them doing what they love.
Yeah.
And that liberates you and frees you to do what you love in life, and absolutely no reason not to. The only reason people aren't doing what they love is they don't know the strategies on how to do it. And if you teach them that and they apply that, there's not anybody in here that can't do that. I've taken housewives that aren't even working, start businesses with that same principle from doing that from their own home. And I've seen amazing things happen. But if you can't wait to get up in the morning and be of service to people, people can't wait to give it. And when you're doing something that's highest on your value, you're most objective, you're most reflective. And if you're reflective, you're not narcissistically talking down on your customer and not meeting their needs, which eventually humble you by pride, going into hubris. And if you're altruistic and minimizing yourself and exaggerating them, you're sacrificing profits. So anytime you exaggerate or minimize yourself, instead of be yourself, which is an reflection of your highest value, you automatically undermine the fair exchange component of the sustainable transactions that allow both you and them to want to continue to do business. And so therefore, your true authenticity, your equanimity of spiritual mission in life is an expression of your material manifestation. Mm-hmm. There's no separation between spirit. Spirit without matter is, motionless, and matter without, or expressionless, and matter without spirit is motionless. You want to be inspired by what you do and do it in a way that it materializes and manifests on the planet and serves vast numbers of people. If you do, you're going to get a vast return on all your investment of time and energy.
Well put. Well put. Maybe if we could dive more into the law of fair exchange, that all transactions are striving towards fair exchange. How does that work?
Well, if you meet somebody, if you infatuate with them and you put them on a pedestal and you minimize yourself, you are too humble to admit what you see in them inside you, and you minimize. And when you minimize, all values in society go from those who have the most power to those who have least power. So you tend to inject their values in your life and try to live in their values, which is futile. You can't be them. You'll be second at being them instead of first being you. And if you resent somebody and look down on them and exaggerate yourself, you're too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you, you'll tend to project your values onto them and expect them to live in your values. Anytime you're narcissistically projecting your values onto people and expect them to live in your values, you create futility. Anytime you minimize yourself and inject their values and try to live in their values, you have futility. But the second you have reflective awareness and have true intimacy and realize that you're not above or below and they're not above and below, but you have equanimity within you and equity between you and them, transactions are now in fair exchange. You're both winning. It's a non-zero sum game. The other two are zero sum games. You're trying to get something for nothing or give something for nothing. And you're walking around with carelessness or carefulness instead of caringness. And caring is what keeps rings on fingers in relationships and allows people to maximize their sustainable fair exchange. And then people want to get up and do more business with you and you want to give business to them because you both got what you wanted. And this is the difference. People think that they can sell and go and get a fortune out of it and take advantage of people, but then they undermine their brand and they don't build something it's no meaning there. The mean is the mean between the pairs of opposites. And when you have meaning in your business, you're philanthropic, you love human beings, and you want to go and be of service. In the great book of Wealth by Hubert L. Bancroft, the very first chapter and section of the book, it says there are three things common to the wealthiest people in the world. One, they felt by divine providence and human sovereignty that they were here to serve vast numbers of people. Number two, that they were here to raise the standard of society by investing in inspiration and everybody's mastery, not desperation. And they had transcended the idea of good and evil associated with money. It's simply a measurement of sustainable fair exchange. And wow, when you get those three things in operation, the fortune is all within your grasp.
What are some good questions that the entrepreneurs out there can ask themselves to help them understand if they're, I guess, maybe in alignment with fair exchange, or if they need to reevaluate how their business is being operated to increase the amount of fair exchange?
Well, nature automatically, remember I said that everything is striving to help authenticity. So if you go into a narcissistic assumption and pride and you project onto the world what you think the world needs and wants. A lot of entrepreneurs go out there, I think this is what the world needs, and they go out there and then there's no demand. If there's no demand, you're projecting an assumption and not meeting a need. So when there's a demand and there's people grateful and you've got a backlog, and if you even have to ask the question whether you're in fair exchange or not, there's no question there, because you're grateful for life and they're grateful for doing business with you, and you have a flourishing business. But if you're sitting projecting onto them and not meeting their needs, you're eventually going to get humbled purposely. The symptoms of the business are there to humble you back into authenticity, where you have reflective awareness. reflective awareness is not deflective awareness. It's a realization that they're equally as valuable as you. And it's not just the customer centric. You can't just do customer centric. I mean, even Bezos has had to learn that the hard way now with the Teamsters coming in and creating a kind of a union in his organization because he was more customer centric than employee centric. You got to be employee centric, customer centric, ecologically centric, stockholder centric. You have to think of all the variables, and whoever has the most caringness about all the people that are involved on the largest scale is the one that has the biggest impact in the world. So the caring is a very, selling is caring. You know, if you try to project onto something and sell something that they don't need, even though you think you're slick at it, you're undermining your long-term brand, because they're not going to want to do business with you because you gave them a hype. Hyper and hypo is not true caring. So I'm not interested in hype. I'm interested in caring and delivering a service that matches a real need. And that's where questioning comes in. The quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. If you ask quality questions to customers and to employees to help you and they and everybody get some sort of a fair exchange, then there's no way you will stop your business from flourishing.
I think you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you about asking questions, but I do see a lot of entrepreneurs that kind of get stuck in the mode of, well, I've worked on this business and business model for so long, I'm just going to continue it, or I really believe in this product and service, and I'm just going to keep like building it and building it and building it, and eventually the market will shift, and I'll be, the business will be more successful. What are some ways we can detach from that as entrepreneurs? Because I think we get wrapped up in an idea of a business or product or service that we're really passionate about, that I've seen people spend years of their lives working towards a thing, only after many years and thousands of hours of work do they give up on it and decide it's time to shift because this isn't working. Any ways that we can do that quicker, and maybe realizations if we're stuck in that, if somebody's stuck in that cycle, how they can shift?
Well, it's one thing to have something that's novel that you think is a new paradigm that you want to bring to the world and endure the challenges that it takes. The little house that Elon Musk was living in there in Chico or Boca Chica, Texas, along the beach area there, that little fabricated house, prefabricated house.
Yeah.
The individual was ingenious in creating the designs of those houses. Those are absolutely ingeniously created little homes, and they're cost effective and they're efficiently transported. And they have thought of thousands of things in order to get that on the market. And if they pursued that, even though that may take a decade of their life, they pursue that, they could revolutionize the industry.
Right.
So sometimes if you're showing incremental momentum building opportunities, they're sort of a sign that you're waking people up to that. And so you may learn new ways of communicating in the market, meeting people's needs, keeping the cost down, leveraging yourself with the right celebrities or whatever it is. And you all of a sudden will build a momentum, and you may end up with an absolutely vast fortune out of it. So sometimes not giving up on your dream is important, but there has to be some sort of a sign that you're incrementally making little incremental momentum building achievements along the way.
Right.
If you see nothing happening but a plateau wall, you're either not meeting people's needs, you're not presenting it in a way that's functional for people, you're not thinking about what the other people are offering and making sure you offer a better deal, because every decision a human being has with their money is based on what they believe will give them the greatest advantage, greatest return on investment of their time and money. And if you can't compete with whatever's out there with that, then it's not going to do well. So there's a law called the law of least action, the law of efficiency that Merrill-Lynch, the mathematician, described, and how important it is to make sure that you work towards efficiency and effectiveness. When Ford Motor Company was with Henry Ford, he looked at how do I effectively and efficiently create a car that matches the market's desire and what they'll pay for it. And he figured it out, and he made the machinery, and he made the ergonomics, make it where it was down to so efficient that it got the car out there. So if we're constantly refining and working on it and making incremental progress, then we don't have to give up on it. We can hold on to a dream and a vision, but there has to be some sort of evidence of it, little incremental momentum building progress, or otherwise you're hitting a wall and you're not doing something that's meeting a need.
Right.
So if you get an absolute wall there, I don't say give up, refine what you're doing, or find something that really meets a need. But don't see, if you sacrifice what you do just to meet a need, to make money, you'll end up debaucherous, kind of like the Wolf on Wall Street. But if you do something that's deeply meaningful, that doesn't meet a need, you'll do something that's heart opening, but you won't have any profits. But you put those two together, now you'll make a profit, you'll be philanthropic.
Love it. So another article that you wrote is, it really stuck out to me. And I think we've kind of overlapped, talking about subjects. It seems like, anytime, it seems like the core of this interview for sure is about finding your core authenticity, bringing it and sharing it to the world so you can operate on a higher level, and also doing that in business as well. This article, Doctor, you were talking about, are you a slave to your passion or a master of your mission? And it really stood out to me because so many people out there are really enslaved to their passions, right? And not ever making the jump or really making that shift to becoming a master or a champion of their mission. And maybe if we could dive into some of the points that you discussed in this article, the etymology of passion and mission, and the values in your inspired mission.
Yeah. An animal in the wild is camouflaged very commonly in the food chain from predator and from prey. That way they can capture the prey and avoid the predator. In order to do that, there's a part of our brain and in animal brains that has what they call pareidolia, the ability to see, well, first there's patternicity. There's an ability to see patterns in the camouflage that might be live. Then there's the pareidolia, the ability to see faces in those patterns. And then there's agenticity, the tendency to see them alive and animated. And then there's what they call false positives. Then the purpose of false positives is to be able to get the adrenaline and noradrenaline up high enough to be able to run fast enough to capture the prey or avoid the predator. And so when we're in survival, because we're hungry or we might have to run from predator, the amygdala comes online and these actions come online. And we as humans still have these. We still have these activities. Almost everybody's walked in a marble bathroom and seen faces on the marble of animals or humans on it. This is pareidolia. And so we have this mechanism, and we cause us to have, instead of an objective view, a subjective bias, a confirmation bias and a disconfirmation bias on our reality in order to get the adrenaline flowing to capture something. We have to be infatuated with capturing it or resentful to get away from it. And so we automatically skew our reality and polarize our perceptions and go into the survival amygdala, where we have fast conducting neurons for emergencies and survival. And if you're running a business with that way, not a lot of animals become wealthy. I know some humans with animals have, but not animals. Uh-huh. And the reason being is because they're letting themselves subjectively bias their interpretation of the market and their own actions. They're not really fully aware. They're not videoing what they're doing and looking at what the results are. They're not really responding and finding out what the real needs are. And they're not centered. They're not in tune, on time, on target, you might say, with an objective view of what's actually needed and what they're actually doing. And this is why living with high priority mission is so important, because in that case, the forebrain calms down those animal impulses and instincts, gets us with intuition, the sixth sense, and gets us into more reasonable objectives. And we get our facts in order, not our emotions. And as Warren Buffett says, don't expect to manage money if you can't manage your emotions. And Robert Greene in his 48 Laws said, the number one obstacle to the thing is not knowing how to manage your emotions. And that's, in a sense, EQ with IQ. Your IQ and EQ and abstraction levels are forebrain oriented. And so if you really want to master the business world, it's about prioritizing and living by an inspired mission, some mission that's bigger than the obstacles. If your mission is bigger than the obstacles turn into opportunities. and you take whatever happens that perturbs you. You have interoceptive homeostasis in your physiology, and all the extra perceptions that come in that perturb us from the outer world are neutralized. That's why William James, the father of modern psychology, and even Wilhelm Wundt, another father of psychology, said that you measure an individual by their ability to not see the world running them, but them transforming their perception of the world and run themselves. The greatest discovery of our generations, human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and decisions and actions in mind. So yeah, it's knowing how to ask questions that calm down the impulses and instincts, allow us to be objective and stay focused on our mission and not be distracted by our passions of avoid and seek. The passions are where we're out of control. That's what it meant in its original. The Stoics and Marcus Aurelius talked about it, and even Zeno back at the time in the Cyprus where he lived, the Ionians and the Cyprians, they basically talked about how important it is to transcend that. Even then, 2,400 years ago, 500, 600 years ago, they knew this. It hasn't changed since.
I would guess, based on what you've said, that one of the best ways to manage our emotions or to increase our EQ would be to ask questions or ask the right questions. Is there anything else that you think is really key or essential to increase our EQ and manage our emotions better?
Yep. When we're infatuated with something, we're conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides. So therefore, we're blind, ignorant, and unconscious of downsides. And when we're resentful to something, which represents predator, we're unconscious of the upsides and conscious of the downsides. Again, ignorant. So our ignorance is basically incomplete awareness. We're not mindful, we're mindless. And in the process of doing that, asking questions that make us aware of our unconscious is what our intuition is constantly trying to do. Our real sixth sense is nothing more than the whispering inside to try to make us aware of what we're unconscious so we can be fully conscious. And that's what takes us back to the meaning and gives us meaning in life. Extracting meaning out of our existence is actually what the brain does when you're living by highest priority. It automatically, intuitively prompts that question intuitively in our mind to see the things we're blind and unconscious of so we can be fully conscious, so we can make wise actions, not emotional decisions. And the word decide means to bring death to an option. So we're literally having a zero-sum game when we're dealing with our emotions, and we're in a non-zero-sum game and trying to do a win-win when we're in our objective winning state. And that's where you have the objectivity. That's where you have equanimity. And this has been known for centuries. And all we have to do is live by asking intuitive questions. If I'm infatuated, what is the downside? If I'm resentful, what is the upside? How is it trying to get me authentic? Because if I'm infatuated, I'm minimizing me. And that's not me. When I'm resentful, I'm exaggerating me. That's not me. I'm only me when I'm actually level-headed and objective, and I'm actually in a state of grace where I really appreciate what I'm getting to do with who people I get to do it with. And that's reflective awareness, not deflective. When you're judging, you're deflecting. You're disowning parts of yourself. The Gnostics in the 2nd century, early Christian movement, were talking about pleroma, fullness, and emptiness. And emptiness came from judging people, and fullness came from appreciating and loving people and trying your best to find complete fair exchanges with people. So this is even before the business world got a hold of it, known in the social world and the theological world, how important this is to have fulfillment in life.
It seems like there's so much overlap with really the most important thing in life, and what you've talked about on this interview is really getting in tune with your most authentic self and letting go of anything that doesn't serve that. I think we're going to wrap up here pretty soon, but I want to ask you, is there any final words that you would like to share with the entrepreneurs out there and the people of the world that can help them get more in tune with that so they can be more authentic in their lives and how they operate in their businesses?
Well, the prioritization that I've already mentioned, and living by the highest value is one, but if you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, your day is designed to fill up with low priority distractions that don't, to let you know you're not being authentic. The symptoms in your business are not bad. They're actually gifts, because they're trying to guide you back to authenticity. If you look carefully and look through those eyes, you'll see your business is doing everything it can to help you flourish. And if you're not filling your day with challenges that inspire you, challenges are things that are problems in the world that people need help in. If you're not solving your day with challenges, ever greater challenges that inspire you, your day is going to fill up with challenges that don't. When you're filling your day with challenges that inspire you, create eustress, and you have an immune response that's actually in your favor, and you actually have telomeres that grow on your genes, and you live a longer life. But if you're actually trying to avoid challenges and look for, see, the amygdala is always wanting to avoid predator and seek prey, avoid pain, seek pleasure, avoid challenge, seek opportunity this way.
Right.
The individual that goes and tackles challenges and embraces challenges and mitigates the risks and finds solutions are the most fulfilled people on the planet. They're the ones that make the difference. I ask people in every country I've been in, I've spoken to 154 countries. I ask people wherever I go, how many of you ever used Microsoft Windows? Every hand goes up. I said, it's because he solved a major problem that we've kind of forgotten and taken for granted now. But at one time, Windows was a major discovery. And he solved that problem. And that's why he's a billionaire. Go and care enough about humanity to find the biggest problems that would inspire you to solve. And put your focus and dedicate some energies on that. And come up with creative and innovative solutions, tackling those challenges with the resources that you have on a daily basis or the people who are experts in the field. And go do something amazing that's going to make a difference, and watch what happens to your life.
Love it. Okay. I love that. This has been an incredible show, an incredible interview. Thank you so much, Dr. Demartini. If the listeners want to learn more about what you have going on, where's the best place they can do that at? And I think also you mentioned a 30-minute questionnaire about getting in alignment with yourself.
Well, if they go on to drdemartini.com, my website is an educational website. You may have seen it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's got thousands of interviews. I write for 1,500 magazines around the world. And there's thousands of interviews. There's thousands of podcasts and webinars and radio and television interviews. And there's YouTube videos. There's webinars. There's all kinds of things. There's just tons of information that you could just spend. You'd almost have to believe in Buddhism and believe in reincarnation just to be able to stay on there long enough to get through it all. I'm joking. But there's also the value determination process on there. That's a 30-minute private thing that you can stay on there, and you can actually do the process, look at what it is, it'll print it out, you can store it, you can come back any other time in your life, which I recommend doing it quarterly, and look at what the evolution of your values is doing, and then keep congruent with it. Give yourself permission to live authentically and congruently. And I promise you that the energies will go up, the achievements will go up, the fulfillment will go up in your life, because we're rewarded by being our magnificence of our true self. The magnificence of who we truly are is far greater than any fantasies we'll impose on ourselves. So take advantage of the website. It's educational and also practical. And then you can get in touch with where I am. If you look on the events, you can see where I am around the world or what programs I'm doing. And plus, there's lots of products and services on there for anybody that sees something that resonates with what their voids and values are at the time.
Incredible. I love the way you put that. Give yourself permission to live authentically. And we all could learn a lot from that and practice that more often. Dr. Demartini, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all your tips and tricks and wisdom. It's always a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on the show again. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. And I hope to see you soon on a boat off the coast of the Amalfi. And I'll have my boat and you can have and then I'll pull up to your boat and say hello and send you some fish.
Sounds wonderful to me. Just let me know in advance and we'll organize it.
Sounds great. Thank you again, sir. It's been a pleasure. And listeners, I want to thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.